The Business of Biotech is produced by Life Science Connect and its community of learning, solving, and sourcing resources for biopharma decision makers. If you're working on biologics process development and manufacturing challenges, you need to swing by bioprocessonline.com. If you're trying to stay ahead of the cell or gene therapy curve, visit cellandgene.com. When it's time to map out your clinical course, let clinicalleader.com help. And if optimizing outsourcing decisions is what you're after, check out outsourcepharma.com. We're Life Science Connect, and we're here to help. We've dropped a few episodes digging into CDMO sponsor relationships, episodes 182 with Scorpius and Fina Bio, and episode 173 with Forge and Ray Therapeutics come to mind as a couple of recent examples, but none of those episodes highlight an outsourcing partnership quite as unique as the one we're digging into today. I'm Matt Pillar. This is the Business of Biotech, and on today's show, we're talking with CTMC co-founder and CEO, Dr. Jason Bach, and clinical stage cell therapy company KSQ Chief Technology Officer Thomas Leach about the unique beginnings of a boutique CDMO, the even more unique aspects of its partnership model, and how the collaboration has accelerated the development of KSQ's TIL program. Jason and Tom, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Matt, for having us.
Great to be here. It's good to see you again, Matt.
Oh, it's great to see you guys too. I'm really looking forward to this one, and I'm honored that you've chosen to spend your time with us and sharing the story with us. And the story, the origin story of CTMC. So normally I wouldn't do this. Normally I'd be like, hey, this is all about the sponsor. I'm going to ask the outsource, the CDMO to chime in a little bit here and there. But in this case, because CTMC's origins are so interesting, that origin story is so interesting, that's where I want to start, Jason. So I want to begin with you, and I just want to ask you to tell us that origin story, sort of about the way that CTMC came to be an enabler of translation from academic science to industrial therapeutic development. I mean, that transition that happened there.
Yeah, that's a great description. So thanks for the opportunity. So leading up to starting CTMC, I had over a 20-year career in small, medium, large-size biotech and biopharma, developing biologics, protein therapeutics, mostly antibody therapeutics. And with the commercial approval of the first-generation CAR-Ts, I saw this tremendous potential of this new therapeutic modality, and yet could also tell that the biggest challenge of this was not clinical efficacy. It was amazing in terms of curing cancer in late stage patients, and yet the manufacturing challenges were going to be the thing that limited the potential of this field. And that's what I had spent a long time developing in biologics and seeing antibody field develop from over the course of 20 years. And so I wanted to find some way of accelerating cell therapy as a field. And coincidentally, some of the leadership from MD Anderson Cancer Center had reached out to me and talking about how we could potentially work together. And so we put our heads together and decided to try something very new. And I moved my family down to Houston, Texas, and took a position within MD Anderson to essentially create an internal biotech focused on cell therapy that would work with the academicians at MD Anderson closely, take their research concepts, help them to industrialize that, manufacture those, handle regulatory interactions in a very industrial way, and then bring those into the MD Anderson clinic to establish proof of concept.
Yeah. Jason, I want to interrupt you there real quick because I'm as you describe this, it occurs to me, like, I have a lot of conversations with academicians. I have a lot of conversations with sort of translational stage biotech builders, aspirational biotech builders. And I'm always amazed, like this concept that you're describing right now is novel in and of itself, because I'm always amazed at the gap that at least I perceive based on what I hear, the gap between molecular discovery in any modality and how do I make this into a business? Like, how do I take this thing to the point where I feel like I can reach some, develop it to reach some patients? Do you see, I mean, is that a thing, or is it just my imagination?
1,000%, a billion percent. I couldn't agree more. And it's amazing because it's just an aspect of exposure. These professors are incredibly smart, much smarter than me. But they just haven't had exposure to industrialization and therapeutics development and quality by design and how to really approach regulatory interactions. And especially, I think this is especially true in cell therapy, where it was in the purview of academic medical centers for 20 years until the last 7, maybe 10 years, where it started to get more industrialized. Mm-hmm. And so even more to that extent in manufacturing, where a lot of the manufacturing for these cell therapies were in academic medical centers run by super smart professors, often in like stem cell transplant group, where there's some adjacencies. But there's a gap between that and therapeutics development with commercial intent.
Yeah.
And that was, I think, the insight that the leadership at MD Anderson had about creating this internal group. And I should say, to give them full credit, they had sort of even test modeled this, if you will, with small molecules previously, and built an industrial group to do this with small molecules. And that had been successful in generating, over the course of 6 or 7 years, 7 or 8 clinical candidates that went to IND and ended up being partnered with biotech companies along the way. So we had a little bit of precedence for this at MD Anderson, but then doing it with cell therapy, where we were going to really take control of the manufacturing, was a whole different level of approach. And I really credit MD Anderson sort of vision and leadership for willing to do big things. You often hear about that being the motto of Texas, and it really is true. MD Anderson, one of their slogans is "Do no small things."
Yeah. And
they are the #1 cancer center in the world, and take that very seriously, and not just try and okay, let's just incrementally do things. Let's do things that maybe we're the only ones who can do.
Yeah.
That's a little bit was when we got together and we started brainstorming. That was my #1 question. And I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but when I was being recruited, I got about 15 minutes with the president of MD Anderson. And it's like, what do you want to know? And my only question for you is, are you willing to do big things? Or is this going to be an academic initiative that we announce and, fund through, $100,000 grants and things?
Yeah.
And he was like, we want to do big things.
He's like, you're in Texas, man.
Yeah.
Everything we do is big.
We do no small things here. We own that we're the #1 cancer center, and we want to use that to propel things forward with bold initiatives, step changes.
Yeah.
So to that end, and I won't go too far, but okay, so then you flash forward just a couple months, I take the job, start working at MD Anderson. We identified a local cell therapy development and manufacturing facility that I'm sitting in today. That's was just a couple hundred yards down the road from MD Anderson. 60,000 square foot industrial facility that Bellicum Pharmaceuticals had built to very high standards to use for their clinical manufacturing and even for their plans for their launch. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of especially cell therapy biotech companies had made the decision that they want to divest their facility. And we became aware of it and jumped to the front of the line. And then I came back to that MD Anderson and president. I'm like, hey, remember when you said you wanted to do big things? How about we buy a facility? And he said yes. And so that was how we really got started.
And that was that the point with was that sort of the inflection point that you look back on and say like that's when we started turning the corner from sort of being this translational enabler to something more akin to a CDMO?
Well,
or would
yeah,
you
I mean,
not, am I unfairly characterizing when I use the CDMO term?
yeah, I don't really like CDMO term. It's more we're see, and I'll just like you started with this origin story, we were created as an internal biotech to help MD Anderson professors develop their products. So rather than for every, like traditionally the path is an academic has an idea, patents it, spins it out as a biotech company, tries to raise money. Like MD Anderson had enough resources to try and do a lot of this and almost like incubate these companies internally. And so we would play the role of that early stage biotech of working with the academic discovery, industrializing it, carrying out IND enabling studies, supporting regulatory interactions, and then designing a clinical study with MD Anderson clinicians to get to clinical proof of concept. So manufacturing is, especially for cell therapies, was a key part of that, was like foundational part of that. But there are many other supportive elements of it too, to help get the interesting discoveries to patients in a robust way.
Yeah. All right. So I think, Thomas, I did bring you on the show for a reason.
Sorry. Once you get me started,
I love it. It's all good stuff. It's terrific stuff. And Thomas's story, and sort of the origin story of the CTMC KSQ relationship will, I think, illustrate a lot of what you were just talking about, Jason. So Thomas, I want to turn to you, and I want to learn a little bit about KSQ and specifically where KSQ was in terms of your transition from target exploration to therapeutic development back in the days before you met Jason.
Sure. Well, I think, the origin story that Jason described came along at the perfect time for KSQ Therapeutics. At the time, our gene-edited TIL programs were at a really crucial point. We were very, very far along in the discovery process, and we'd done a ton of really terrific process and analytical development work, but we were not yet to an IND clearance for our first therapy. And I think maybe to take a step back and talk about the origins of KSQ would help explain maybe why that is. We were founded on this idea that there could be a better way to uncover optimal targets for oncology. And with the emergence of CRISPR gene editing technology years ago, we believed that we could do an unbiased genome-wide screen that would reveal the best performing gene targets. Not what we thought the best targets should be, but the actual best performing targets. And that's exactly what we did. And then we applied it in a number of different ways. And we found that when we systematically knocked out each gene and then looked at the performance across a range of different cancer models, those experiments revealed a collection of high-value targets that up until that time had been largely overlooked. So now fast forward, some of those targets we're pursuing with partners, and some of those targets we're developing ourselves. And just last year, we announced that we had executed out-licensing deals with Roche and Ono Pharmaceuticals. And then we've also maintained a long-running research collaboration with the terrific team at Takeda. But in addition to the ones that we're outsourcing, there are a number of those targets that we're actually developing ourselves. Our two lead candidates are gene-edited TIL cell therapies. And this is where we arrive at the partnership with Jason's team at CTMC. By late 2022, when Jason and I first met, KSQ-001EX, which is a single edit gene knockout, and KSQ-004EX, a dual edit therapy, the team at KSQ had done a terrific job of developing both of those to the point where we had an early version of our manufacturing process, and we needed to take the next step and then secure a clinical supply. And that's what brought us together with CTMC. Our platform led us to some unique and very promising targets. But as you alluded to earlier, Matt, having a target is not the same thing as having a therapy, and having a therapy is not the same thing as delivering a patient outcome. And our partnership with CTMC has really helped us accelerate those leads from target to therapy to uninterrupted supply and ultimately patient outcomes.
Yeah. I'm not going to put words in your mouth. I'm going to paraphrase. The last time we spoke, you were telling me, you're giving me a little bit of color on the development of those candidates. internally. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Like tell us like what were the challenges that you were struggling with that made the introduction to Jason fortuitous?
Sure. Well, for starters, I mean, cell therapy is not for the faint of heart, right? There's no shortage of difficulties when it comes to developing complex therapies like this. But we were confident in the targets. We felt good about the process and analytics that we had developed up until that point. But our main difficulty and something that is something that was really not uncommon to biopharma companies, we were really struggling to identify a partner that could support our program timelines with supply. Mm-hmm. And in all of our conversation with potential partners, it went something like, we can slot you in at this future date, or we can start the work at this site and then transition it to a new site midstream. And that is completely understandable. I get it. Those are common business constraints that everyone faces. And I've had those conversations more than a few times over my career. And no CMO wants to delay a therapy from getting to patients. No one wants to do that. But with every option that we were looking at, our program timelines would get pushed out and our patients would be left waiting. And we just had to find a different way. And CTMC helped us find it.
Were those timeline challenges, some of those challenges you said you've run into many times in your career, were they relative at all to the time, to the year, 2022, or given your experience pre and post COVID and everything, all the disruption that caused, is that more chronic than just sort of that point in time issue?
COVID didn't help, that's for sure, right? Nothing got faster during COVID. But I would also say that when we look at the late teens, there was still a capacity that was being brought online across cell therapy. And the capacity was still catching up with a lot of the discovery work and clinical demand that was emerging. And so I don't think that we're in necessarily that same place today. But at the time, late teens, early 20s, we were still chasing capacity that was trying to catch up with a lot of the groundbreaking discovery work that was happening.
Yeah.
If I could just add, Matt, to that, just to add on to what Tom was saying about cell therapy in general, goes even more so for TIL. I think, we're starting to get our arms around CAR T now as a field, and processes are becoming platform and the like. But in TIL, the manufacturing platforms are still huge differentiators because it's a big challenge from a scientific point of view to take a piece of a patient's tumor and extract the lymphocytes from that. Those lymphocytes have been beaten up, down, sideways, and are not that healthy. And so specifically, MD Anderson and CTMC have developed specific processes to enhance that more so than the traditional, what's called the Rosenberg or NCI process that's been used for more than 20 years to enhance the success rate in that extraction and the number of lymphocytes that can be expanded. And so that was also a part of what helped the acceleration by being able to leverage that manufacturing platform and combine it with all the impressive work KSQ had done before.
Yeah. Thomas, what was your first exposure to Jason and CTMC?
Well, I think in the field of TILs, we were well aware of them and what they could do. I could let Jason talk about the specifics, but they've been doing important work on TILs going back for quite a few years. And in fact, there are some folks on their team that have been working in TILs for a decade plus. So it's a really, really experienced group. And through conference and industry meetings, we knew each other's work really well. And when the opportunity presented itself to work together, that wasn't a particularly hard decision.
So how did the opportunity present itself?
Well, the reality was that we were searching for a home for supply of for clinical supply, and it was at one of those industry conferences where we had what was an ongoing series of discussions, and realized that we weren't just talking about the science of the discovery or the field of TILs, that there was an opportunity to actually collaborate here, and it took off very quickly from there.